My name is Clara, and I am 35 years old. For the past decade, my hands have been my livelihood, shaping stubborn clay into something soft and yielding, something useful and beautiful. There is an honesty in pottery that I've always cherished. It responds directly to the pressure you apply. It either finds its form or collapses. It does not lie. Perhaps that's why I've always found it so difficult to navigate my husband's family, where pressure is applied indirectly, and the truth collapses under the weight of unspoken expectations. 10 years of marriage to Liam has taught me that the Davenports operate on a currency I've never been able to mint: legacy. Not the legacy of love or kindness, but one of lineage, influence, and a particular kind of wealth that measures its worth in generations, not dollars. And here I was, on a cold Christmas Eve, watching the carefully constructed bravery on my 9-year-old daughter Maya's face begin to crumble, as gift after gift was unwrapped and her name was never called. She sat on the edge of a silk ottoman, her small hands folded in the lap of her simple velvet dress, staring at the intricate patterns of the Persian rug. Her quiet dignity was a blade in my heart, sharper and more painful than any outburst of tears could have been. Then Liam stood up. The soft murmur of polite conversation stilled as he reached into the inner pocket of his tweed jacket. What followed was not the dramatic spectacle of a viral video, but something quieter, more profound. It was the moment a man, known for his gentle nature and desire for peace, decided that peace at any price was no longer worth paying. It was the moment he chose the family we had built over the one he was born into, with a simple cream-colored envelope that would recalibrate the entire axis of our world. Liam and I met in a crowded, dusty university library. He was the architecture student from a world of clean lines and inherited prestige, sketching futures in a leather-bound notebook. I was the art student with clay under my fingernails, my tuition paid by scholarships and late-night shifts at a campus coffee shop. Our worlds were different, but they touched at a point of shared wonder, a love for how things are made, buildings for him, pottery for me. His parents, Richard and Beatrice Davenport, saw our connection not as a bridge, but as a blemish on their pristine family blueprint. "She has such intensity," Beatrice had remarked during our first meeting at their sprawling Mercer Island estate, her gaze lingering on my paint-splattered jeans with a kind of fascinated horror. It was her way of saying I was unpolished, too much raw material and not enough refined product. Despite their silent, steely disapproval, Liam proposed 2 years later. Our wedding was an intimate affair in a botanical garden, a far cry from the society event Beatrice had envisioned, and the distance between us and his family widened. A decade had passed, but in their eyes, I remained the bohemian artist who had somehow captured their pragmatic, blue-blooded son. The Davenports weren't just wealthy, they were foundational. Richard had inherited his father's shipping empire and expanded it into a global logistics behemoth, ensuring his 3 children would navigate life on a sea of untroubled financial calm. Their waterfront home wasn't just a house, it was a statement, a modern glass and cedar fortress that looked out over Lake Washington with an air of serene, unassailable power. When Maya was born 2 years into our marriage, Beatrice performed her grandmotherly duties with photographic precision. She held Maya for the requisite social media posts, her smile perfectly angled, but the emotional thermostat in the room remained stubbornly low. She doted on her other grandchildren, especially those of Liam's older sister, Genevieve, who had married a tech CEO. Those children, with their sailing trophies and junior polo lessons, were polished little mirrors of the Davenport legacy. Maya, with her wild curls and soul-deep love for the natural world, was an anomaly. She preferred spending hours in our small backyard, sketching the starlings and finches that visited our bird feeder, to the structured, resume-building activities of her cousins. "She's so wonderfully observant," Beatrice would say, the word wonderfully somehow imbuing the observation with a sense of pity, as if Maya's quiet passion was a charming but ultimately useless quirk. As Christmas approached each year, a familiar knot of anxiety would tighten in my stomach. The annual Davenport Christmas Eve Gala was a production Beatrice planned with the precision of a military campaign. From the professionally curated floral arrangements to the strategic seating chart that always placed me beside a distant, elderly relative, it was an evening designed to reinforce the family hierarchy. This year, Maya had been particularly hopeful. She had spent a month working on a detailed colored pencil drawing of a Steller's jay, a magnificent, crested bird she'd finally captured in a rare moment of stillness. Against my gentle warnings not to invest too much hope, she had mounted it on cardstock and wrapped it in paper she'd marbled herself. At 9, she still operated on the beautiful, heartbreaking logic that effort and love were currencies even the Davenports would honor. "Do you think Grandma will hang it in the gallery hallway?" she had asked, her brow furrowed in concentration as she tied the yarn ribbon. The gallery hallway was a long, sterile corridor in the Davenport home lined with framed photos of the other grandchildren accepting awards and posing on yachts. "It's a beautiful thought, my love," I'd answered, my voice carefully neutral, the lie of omission tasting like ash in my mouth. Liam, my dear, optimistic Liam, always believed in the potential for change. "They're just from a different generation, Clara," he would insist after another strained visit. "Their love language is formal." The morning of the gathering, Maya was awake before the sun, her excitement a tangible thing in the quiet of our little craftsman house. She insisted on wearing a simple navy velvet dress, one I had made for her, smoothing its soft nap as if the gesture itself could prepare her for the evening ahead. The drive across the floating bridge to Mercer Island was a journey from our world to theirs. With each mile, the cozy, eclectic neighborhood of Ballard, with its independent shops and salty air, gave way to manicured lawns and gated driveways. I felt my shoulders inching toward my ears while Liam kept up a steady, cheerful patter about the cousins we'd see. In the back seat, Maya clutched her wrapped drawing, rehearsing the words she would use to present her gift. As we pulled into the long, curving driveway, flanked by luxury cars that gleamed under the landscape lighting, Liam reached over and squeezed my hand. "It'll be different this year," he promised. "I have a good feeling." I nodded, not because I believed him, but because I loved him for wanting it to be true. The house was a monument to minimalist perfection. A towering wreath on the massive pivoting front door featured silver-sprayed eucalyptus and white amaryllis, echoing the stark, elegant theme within. Everything screamed taste, wealth, and a kind of joyless precision. A uniformed staff member opened the door before we could ring the bell. Beatrice Davenport appeared, a vision in winter white cashmere. Her silver hair was swept into an elegant chignon, and her smile was a masterpiece of social engineering. "Liam, darling," she exclaimed, offering her son a cheek to kiss. "You made it." She then turned to me, her eyes doing a swift, comprehensive appraisal. "Clara, that shawl is very artisanal." Before I could decipher the intended meaning, she bent slightly toward Maya. "And Maya, goodness, you've shot up. The other children are in the media room. Leo is showing everyone his new drone." Maya hesitated, her drawing held close. But Beatrice had already turned to greet the next wave of arrivals. Liam gave our daughter an encouraging nod. "Go on, sweet pea. We'll be right here." As Maya walked reluctantly toward the sound of her cousins' excited voices, I drew a deep breath and braced myself for another Davenport Christmas. The interior of the Davenport home felt less like a celebration and more like a high-end art installation on the theme of winter. A 16-foot Fraser fir, decorated with what looked like hand-blown glass ornaments in shades of silver and ice blue, stood in the two-story great room. White orchids and silver branches erupted from minimalist vases on every surface. It was breathtakingly beautiful and utterly devoid of warmth. As we circulated, Liam was greeted with hearty backpats and genuine smiles, while I received polite nods and the kind of searching looks reserved for a curious piece of art one isn't sure one likes. Genevieve, Liam's sister, enveloped him in a hug before turning to me. "Clara, you look well," she said, her eyes flicking over my simple black dress and the colorful handmade shawl that now felt like a declaration of war. "Still teaching your pottery classes?" "I am," I said, managing a smile. "The studio is doing well." How lovely that you have a hobby that pays for itself, she replied, before steering Liam away to talk about a recent family ski trip to Whistler, a trip to which we had not been invited. Liam's brother, Thomas, arrived with his wife, Amelia, and their 2 sons, both dressed in matching cable-knit sweaters. Thomas was the most approachable of the siblings, occasionally making a real effort to draw me into conversation. Amelia, however, was Beatrice's heir apparent. "Clara," she said, air-kissing the space near my cheeks. "We missed you at the symphony benefit last week. Though I imagine your little studio keeps you so busy. It's truly admirable that you insist on having your own thing." The implication was clear. The other Davenport women did not need a thing. Their husband's success was their own. "I love my work," I said, the simple truth feeling like a shield. I made my way to the professionally staffed bar in the corner, feeling a desperate need for a buffer against the polite onslaught. "A glass of Pinot Gris, please," I requested. "Make that too," a warm voice said beside me. It was Isabel, Richard's niece, a landscape architect who, like me, seemed to have married into the family from a different planet. If I have to hear one more story about Genevieve's son winning a regional chess tournament, I might start chewing on the floral arrangements. I laughed, a genuine, grateful sound. "You just got here?" 20 minutes ago, she sighed, taking a large sip of her wine. "I've already been advised on the best dermatologist for preventative care and been told my boots are a bit rugged for an evening affair." We clinked glasses, 2 lone soldiers in a foreign land. Across the vast room, I saw Maya slip out of the media room, her shoulders slumped. I excused myself from Isabel and went to her. "Everything all right, my love?" I asked, kneeling beside her. She shrugged, avoiding my eyes. "Leo said my dress looks homemade. And Sophia said only people who are poor give presents they made themselves." My blood ran cold, but I kept my face serene. "Well, that doesn't sound very kind, does it? Or very true." I smoothed her hair. "Where's your drawing?" "I put it under the tree," she whispered. "Grandpa Richard said all gifts go there." I glanced over at the mountain of presents, all wrapped in professionally coordinated, heavy paper with silver ribbons. I could just spot Maya's small, lopsided package with its marbled paper and yarn bow. The sight of it, so full of hope and so utterly out of place, made my chest ache. Beatrice materialized at my elbow, a flute of champagne in her hand. "Maya, darling, the caterers are serving miniature desserts in the kitchen. Why don't you go see?" As Maya scurried off, Beatrice turned her attention to me. "Clara, I've been meaning to ask. Have you given any more thought to enrolling Maya at Lakeside? All the other grandchildren attend. It's a significant investment, of course, but Richard and I would be willing to contribute. For Maya's sake." "Maya loves her school," I said, my voice tight. "She's thriving." Beatrice sighed, a soft, disappointed sound. "I'm sure it's adequate. But the right connections are forged so early. It's not just about education, it's about her future." She patted my arm, a gesture that was meant to seem kind, but felt deeply condescending. "Just think about it. We only want what's best." She drifted away, leaving me simmering. The constant implication that we couldn't, or wouldn't, provide for our own child was a familiar, painful refrain. Liam had a successful career as a partner in a respected Seattle architecture firm. We lived comfortably. But because we chose to live in a smaller home, drive older cars, and invest in experiences over status symbols, we were seen as failing. I found Liam in Richard's study, a room paneled in dark wood and smelling of leather and old money. Richard sat behind a massive desk, a figure of immense and quiet authority. They fell silent as I entered. "Am I interrupting?" "Not at all," Liam said quickly, though his father's cool gaze suggested otherwise. "Just discussing the market," Richard said, his tone dismissive. "Beatrice is probably looking for you, Clara. I believe she wanted some help coordinating the children's activities." The suggestion that my place was with the women and children, not in a room where business was discussed, was as clear as the glass wall overlooking the lake. "Actually," Liam interjected, "I was just telling Dad that Maya's drawing was selected for the Pacific Northwest Youth Art Exhibition." Richard's expression didn't change. "Is that so? How nice." Genevieve's Leo just won his division in the state's sailing regatta. Only 10, and he's already being scouted for the Junior Olympic Development Team. Maya's piece was chosen from over 500 submissions, I said, unable to stop myself. The juror was a curator from the Seattle Art Museum. How nice, Richard repeated, the words utterly meaningless. Speaking of achievements, Liam, did I tell you we've finalized the new contributions to the grandchildren's trusts? It's never too early to secure their futures. The pointed exclusion of Maya from this financial planning was a familiar sting. I glanced at Liam, who looked down at his hands, his jaw tight. He said nothing. A staff member appeared at the door. Mr. Davenport, Mrs. Davenport asked me to announce that dinner will be served in 5 minutes. Thank you, Carlos, Richard said, rising. We mustn't keep Beatrice waiting. She's been planning this menu for months. As we followed him out, Liam took my hand, a silent, apologetic gesture. I squeezed back, but a cold tendril of disappointment was wrapping itself around my heart. Once again, when faced with his father's casual cruelty, Liam had chosen silence. The tension in the house was a palpable thing, a gathering storm. And we hadn't even made it to dinner. Beatrice's Christmas Eve dinner was an exercise in flawless execution. The long dining table, draped in heavy Belgian linen, was a landscape of crystal, silver, and elaborate floral arrangements of white hellebores and dusty miller that were so tall, they obscured the view of the person opposite you. Calligraphed place cards dictated our positions in her social solar system. As predicted, Liam was seated near his father, while I was placed between a second cousin's husband who dealt in municipal bonds and Amelia, Thomas's wife. Maya was at the children's table in an adjacent sunroom, a separate, orbiting moon. Beatrice has really outdone herself, Isabel murmured from across the table, leaning to the side of the floral centerpiece to make eye contact. Though I suspect the height of this thing violates some sort of fire code. I suppressed a smile, her presence a small, welcome anchor. The first course arrived, a chilled cucumber soup with a single, perfect poached prawn. As we ate, Beatrice guided the conversation with the skill of a seasoned conductor, ensuring the spotlight fell on a series of family triumphs. Genevieve, darling, tell everyone about Leo's sailing victory, she prompted, her smile radiating maternal pride. Genevieve obliged, recounting the regatta in excruciating detail, which led to a discussion of the family's upcoming yachting trip through the Greek Isles. And Amelia, Beatrice continued, turning her attention down the table. Didn't Sophia have the lead in her ballet recital? And so it went. Each grandchild's accomplishment was presented, admired, and logged into the family's collective ledger of success. Liam made a valiant attempt to mention Maya's art exhibition, but Beatrice smoothly redirected the conversation to the importance of competitive sports before he could finish his sentence. From the sunroom, I could see Maya watching the adults, her expression unreadable. The man beside me, the bond trader, turned to me. Liam tells me you're an artist. I'm a potter, I clarified. He said, as if that explains something. A hobbyist. My wife took up watercolors for a while. Found it very relaxing. It's my profession, I said, keeping my voice even. Right, he said, already losing interest and turning to the person on his other side. By the time the main course, perfectly seared scallops with saffron risotto, was served, the conversation had shifted to real estate. Genevieve and her husband were closing on a winter home in Aspen. Thomas and Amelia were lamenting the difficulty of finding good contractors for their vineyard property in Walla Walla. And you, Liam? Beatrice asked, her voice carrying down the table. Still in that little craftsman in Ballard? It's been, 9 years now? Our 3-bedroom home, with its rose garden and proximity to a wonderful park, was anything but little. But in the Davenport universe, it was a starter home one was meant to quickly outgrow. We love our house, Mom, Liam replied, his tone diplomatic. And Maya's school is one of the best in the city. Well, when you're ready for something more substantial, you know your father and I are always here to help, Beatrice said, her offer a thinly veiled critique of our financial status. Richard cleared his throat, commanding the table's attention. Speaking of properties, we've decided to open the Aspen House for the New Year's week. Family only, of course. Genevieve, Thomas, we'll see you there. The casual, public exclusion of our family landed with a quiet thud. Liam shifted in his chair but remained silent. Perhaps Maya could join her cousins, Beatrice offered, as if bestowing a great favor. It would be so good for her to spend more time with the family. The subtext was clear. Maya was welcome, I was not. Before I could formulate a polite refusal, Liam spoke. We've already made plans for New Year's, Mom. But thank you. We had no such plans, and I shot him a look of pure gratitude. As dessert, a ridiculously complex deconstructed tiramisu was served. Richard rose with his glass of vintage port. To family, he began. Our most important legacy. To Genevieve and Mark and the brilliant future they're building. To Thomas and Amelia for upholding the family traditions with such grace. He continued, naming each of his children and their spouses, and then each of his grandchildren. Liam and I exchanged a look as it became painfully clear who was being omitted. To the Davenports, Richard concluded. May our name continue to signify excellence and integrity. The clinking of glasses filled the room. The toast, a public affirmation of the family hierarchy, left us on the outside looking in. Only Isabel met my eye, her expression one of pure, unadulterated fury on my behalf. After dinner, Beatrice clapped her hands together lightly. Shall we move to the great room for gifts? I believe Father Christmas has been very generous this year. At this, the children, including Maya, brightened. Despite the slights and the tension, I held on to a sliver of hope that the simple joy of Christmas gifts might salvage the evening for my daughter. I was about to learn how wrong I was. The great room, with its soaring ceiling and wall of glass overlooking the dark lake, was dominated by the magnificent, sterile Christmas tree. Beneath it lay a veritable mountain of presents, all wrapped in the same 3 coordinated patterns of expensive paper, tied with fabric ribbons and adorned with silver-sprayed pine cones. It was less a collection of gifts and more a curated installation of wealth. The children gathered on the vast rug, their faces glowing with anticipation. Maya stood a little apart from her boisterous cousins, but the hope in her eyes was unmistakable, a tiny, flickering candle in the cavernous room. I took a seat on a low-slung Italian sofa, the knot in my stomach returning with a vengeance. Liam sat beside me, his hand finding mine in the space between us. Richard, playing the role of benevolent patriarch, settled into a large leather armchair by the tree, a list in hand. As is our tradition, he announced, his voice resonant, we'll distribute the children's gifts first, youngest to oldest. A staff member stood by, ready to act as an elf for hire. The procession began. Sophia, Amelia's 6-year-old, was first, receiving a life-sized dollhouse, a pony riding camp certificate, and a tiny diamond pendant. Leo, Genevieve's son, received his drone, a new sailboat rudder, and a first-edition set of Tolkien. Each grandchild was called, each one showered with extravagant, thoughtfully chosen gifts that aligned with their approved hobbies. I watched Maya's face. With each name that was called Leo, Sophia, Charlotte, James, her hopeful expression slowly transformed. It was a gradual erosion, from excitement to confusion, then to a dawning, terrible understanding. Yet she held herself with a poise that was heartbreaking, her small shoulders straight, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Liam's grip on my hand tightened until it was almost painful. I glanced at him and saw a muscle twitching in his jaw. It was a rare storm signal from my calm, even-keeled husband. Finally, the last of the cousins, a teenager, received his gifts, a new laptop and ski gear. The mountain of presents had shrunk to a small collection clearly intended for the adults. Maya sat alone on the rug, a small, still island in a sea of her cousin's new acquisitions. An uncomfortable silence descended as the adults in the room slowly registered the omission. A few people shifted in their seats. Isabel stared fixedly at Beatrice, her expression glacial. Well, Richard said, clearing his throat and consulting his list again as if for show. That appears to be all the children's gifts. Now, for the adults, we'll start with. Dad, Liam's voice cut through the silence, sharp and clear. You've forgotten Maya. Richard looked up, feigning surprise. Have I? Let me see. He rustled the papers. Beatrice stepped forward, her hostess smile plastered on her face. Oh, goodness, there must be some sort of mistake. A mix-up with the delivery service, perhaps. Maya, darling, I am certain your gifts are here somewhere. We would never, ever forget you. But her eyes slid past mine, and I knew, with a certainty that felt like ice in my veins, that this was no mistake. This was a message delivered with calculated precision, designed to be deniable but unmistakable. This was the final, definitive underscoring of our status as outsiders. Maya looked down at the toes of her velvet shoes, which she had carefully polished that afternoon. It's okay, Grandma, she said, her voice so small it was almost a whisper. Maybe Santa's reindeer got tired. A few relatives managed strained, awkward chuckles. Genevieve suddenly found it necessary to help Leo unbox his drone. Amelia became intensely interested in an ornament on the tree. I'm sure they'll turn up tomorrow, Beatrice continued, her voice overly bright. But she made no move to search, no gesture to investigate the supposed mix-up. On Christmas Day? How terribly convenient, Isabel muttered, just loud enough for me to hear. I was about to stand, to gather my daughter and walk out of that cold, beautiful house forever, when I felt Liam's hand on my arm, a silent plea to wait. He stood up, his face a calm, unreadable mask. Actually, he said, his voice carrying through the strained silence. There is one more gift. I was saving it for last. Every head turned. Beatrice looked confused. Richard frowned. Ignoring his parents, Liam walked to where Maya sat on the rug and knelt down in front of her, so they were eye to eye. This is for you, sweet pea, he said gently. Mom, and I wanted to give it to you at just the right moment. He pulled a simple, cream-colored envelope from his jacket pocket. Maya took it, her expression a mixture of confusion and residual hope. She looked from her father to me. I gave her a small, encouraging nod, though my own heart was hammering with uncertainty. I had no idea what he was doing. With careful fingers, she broke the seal and pulled out a sheaf of thick, official-looking papers. The room was utterly silent now, every eye fixed on my daughter as she tried to make sense of the documents. At 9, she couldn't grasp their meaning, but the embossed seals and formal type were clearly impressive. What is it, Daddy? She asked, her voice filled with wonder. Liam smiled, and for the first time all evening, the smile reached his eyes, crinkling the corners in the way I loved. That, Maya, he said, his voice ringing with a newfound strength, is your future. And it's the most important gift you'll get tonight. Maya's small fingers traced the embossed seal on the top document, a look of profound confusion on her face. The silence in the room had deepened, becoming heavy and expectant. Everyone, including me, was waiting for Liam to explain. He placed a gentle hand on her shoulder and then stood, turning to face the assembled family. His usual easygoing demeanor was gone, replaced by a quiet, unshakable resolve. Inside that envelope, he announced, his voice calm but resonant, are the incorporation documents for a trust. Clara and I established it for Maya the day she was born. We have been the sole contributors for the past 9 years. A low murmur swept through the room. Beatrice's perfect composure finally fractured, a tiny crack of genuine shock appearing on her face. Richard slowly took off his reading glasses, his eyes narrow and calculating. We decided long ago, Liam continued, his gaze sweeping over his parents, that Maya's security should never be conditional. It should never be a reward for conforming to a certain path or meeting a set of expectations. It is her birthright, given freely, with love. My breath caught in my throat. I felt tears pricking at my eyes as I understood. This wasn't just about a trust fund, it was a declaration of independence. But that's not all, Liam said, turning his attention back to Maya. There's another paper in there, sweet pea. Can you find it? Maya shuffled through the pages and pulled out a folded document with the letterhead of a real estate agency. She held it up to her father, her brow furrowed. That, Liam said, his voice clear and steady for everyone to hear, is the deed to our new house. We closed on it last week. I gasped. A real, audible gasp. A new house? We hadn't been looking. Liam met my shocked gaze with a quick, apologetic smile before continuing. It's a beautiful Adobe-style home, Maya. With a big, walled garden perfect for a dog and a Kiva fireplace. And most importantly, he paused, looking directly at Richard and Beatrice. It's in Santa Fe, New Mexico. The bomb had landed. Beatrice took a half step back, her hand flying to the pearls at her throat. Santa Fe, she whispered, the name of the city sounding like a foreign curse on her tongue. But that's across the country. 1,500 miles, to be precise, Liam confirmed. I've accepted a partnership at an architectural firm there. We're moving at the end of January. Tears were now streaming freely down my face, tears of shock and overwhelming relief. He had built us an escape hatch. While I had been enduring, he had been planning. While I had been absorbing the subtle poisons of this family, he had been finding the antidote. You can't be serious, Richard said. His voice was dangerously low, the quiet rumble before an earthquake. You have obligations here, Liam. To this family. To the company. My primary obligation, Liam replied, his voice unwavering, is to my wife and my daughter. To their happiness and their well-being. Maya, sensing the seismic shift in the room, looked up at me. Are we really moving, Mommy? I found my voice and nodded, smiling through my tears. It looks like we are, my love. But what about my drawing? She asked, her gaze turning to the small, colorful package still sitting forlornly under the tree. I made it for Grandma and Grandpa. Her innocent question hung in the air, a stark reminder of her pure intentions in a room thick with complex motives. A few of the relatives had the decency to look ashamed. Beatrice, ever the master of appearances, quickly regained her composure. Liam, this is hardly the time or the place for such a dramatic announcement. We are your family. These things should be discussed in private. No, Mother, Liam said, his tone firm but not disrespectful. This is exactly the time and the place. For 10 years, I have watched you and Dad subtly, and tonight, not so subtly, chip away at my wife's confidence and ignore my daughter's spirit. I made excuses for you. I told myself you would come around. He gestured to the room full of lavish gifts. But tonight, you made it clear that will never happen. You intentionally hurt our child to make a point. And that is a line I will not let you cross again. It was a simple oversight. Beatrice insisted, though her voice lacked its usual conviction. Was it an oversight when you seated Clara at the opposite end of the table? Liam countered. Was it an oversight when you planned a family trip to Aspen and didn't invite us? Was it an oversight, Dad, when you created trusts for every grandchild except Maya? The room was as silent as a tomb. No one ever spoke to Richard and Beatrice Davenport this way. I have spent a decade trying to build a bridge between my two worlds, Liam's voice softened. But a bridge can't be built if one side keeps dismantling the foundation. We're done. Richard stood up, his face a mask of cold fury. If you walk out that door, if you take this absurd step, do not expect to be welcomed back. The financial support, the inheritance, the board seat I have held for you, consider it all gone. For the first time that night, Liam truly smiled. It was not his accommodating, people-pleasing smile, but something new. Something free. I've been expecting that, Dad. The thing is, Clara and I have never needed your money. We've built our own life on our own terms. We are not a subsidiary of Davenport Logistics. He knelt down to Maya again. What we're giving you tonight, Sweet Pea, is not a house or money for college. It's freedom. The freedom to be exactly who you are, without ever having to perform for love. I could no longer stay seated. I walked over and stood beside my husband and my daughter, placing my hand on Liam's shoulder. We were a unit. We were a team. We should go, I said softly. Liam nodded. He looked at the silent, stunned faces around the room. Merry Christmas, everyone. Then he looked at Maya. Do you still want to give Grandma and Grandpa your gift? Maya looked at her drawing, then at her grandparents. With a quiet grace that shamed every adult in the room, she nodded. She walked over, retrieved her small, handmade package, and approached Richard and Beatrice. She held it out to her grandmother. I made this for you, she said simply. It's a Stellar's J. They're very smart. Beatrice took the gift, her hands trembling slightly. For the first time since I had known her, she looked utterly lost. "Thank you, Maya," she said, her voice barely a whisper. As we turned to leave, an unexpected voice cut through the tension. "Wait." It was Thomas, Liam's brother. He stood, his face pale but determined. "Liam, don't go like this." I tensed, expecting him to plead his parents' case. "He's right," Thomas said, looking at his parents. "What you did tonight, it was cruel. Is this what we are now? A family that punishes a child to control its son." "Thomas, you will sit down," Richard commanded. "No," Thomas said, shaking his head. "I won't. Because if he leaves, and you let him go like this, you're not just losing him. You're losing all of us, piece by piece." I saw a flicker of something, fear, regret, in Beatrice's eyes. But Richard stepped forward, placing a hand on her arm, his expression like granite. "We have indulged Liam's eccentricities for long enough," he said coldly. "If he chooses to abandon his family, that is his decision." Liam met his father's gaze, a long, final look of understanding. "Goodbye, Dad." "Mom." He took my hand in one of his and Maya's in the other. "Let's go home." As we walked out of the Davenport mansion, into the crisp, cold night air, I felt a strange and dizzying mix of devastation and exhilaration. Behind us, the perfect facade of the Davenport family Christmas was shattering into a million pieces. In the car, Maya was quiet for a long time, clutching the thick envelope of her future. "Are Grandma and Grandpa mad at me?" she finally asked in a small voice. Liam caught my eye in the rearview mirror, his own filled with a mixture of pain and love. I turned in my seat to face our daughter. "No, my love," I said softly. "They're not mad at you." Sometimes, adults get so lost looking at their maps of where they think life should go, they forget to look up and see the beautiful, real things right in front of them. "Like my Stellars, Jay?" she asked. "Exactly like your Stellars, Jay," Liam confirmed, his voice thick with emotion as he started the car. "But you know what? I think we should get it professionally framed. And we'll hang it in the very best spot in our new house in Santa Fe. How does that sound?" Maya considered this, then a small smile touched her lips. "Okay, I can draw a roadrunner for the new house too. I saw them in a book." As we drove away, the mansion's cold, bright lights shrinking in the distance, I reached for Liam's free hand and held on tight. There would be time for questions later. The house, the job, the trust fund, the logistics of our new life. But in that moment, all I felt was a profound, overwhelming love for the man who had finally, unequivocally, chosen us. "Thank you," I whispered into the quiet of the car. He squeezed my hand. "Merry Christmas, Clara." From the back seat, Maya's voice piped up, small but clear. "Can we still have our Christmas tomorrow? With the stockings and the French toast?" "Absolutely," I promised, my heart swelling. In fact, I think it might be the best Christmas we've ever had. As we drove home, toward our own small, warm house, I realized that the cream-colored envelope had contained more than just legal documents. It had contained our liberation.